Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are approaching the middle of the season. Half of our teams are entering district play or already in district play. The other half finishing it up with the non-district schedule this week. Couple teams on byes. It's a full mix of everything here as we are about to hit week 5 of the high school football season. So we will look back at what happened last Friday night, what's going to take place this Friday night, and all that it means for all of our local teams. And we, of course, will start with teams that are not playing this week because that's how we do things here on the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. And we will start with the Sherman Bearcats, who have their bye this week after getting their first district win in 6-5A action last Thursday as they beat Lebanon Trail 28-3, head into the bye week with some momentum. We talked a couple weeks ago. They had a chance potentially to go 2-0. If they beat Frisco Centennial, if they beat Lebanon Trail, going to the bye at 2-0 would have been sitting pretty to head into the final stretch of games. Unfortunately, they were not able to get that win over Centennial, losing 14-7, but they bounced back 28-3, and they're able to take some positive momentum between the games that they had the bye week, and then when they host Frisco next Friday night, when just about everybody else has a bye. So it's worked out as well as you can after you drop the district opener to bounce back. This was a game where Lebanon Trail really did not have much of a chance at the end zone. They did kick a field goal in the third quarter, late in the third quarter, when it was already a 22-0 game, and that was something that I tweeted about. I don't understand why you would kick a field goal and still have it be a 3-score game when there's only 13 minutes left. However, that's what Lebanon Trail decided to do instead of going for it on fourth down to try to get a touchdown and make it a 2-possession game. And that was really the best chance that Lebanon Trail had to score. Well, actually, no, I take that back. They had a much better opportunity to score because they had first and goal on the 1-yard line after a 44-yard run by Caleb Broadway, who thought he had a 45-yard touchdown run, and Kane Bowen, the linebacker, ran him down, pushed him out of bounds just before he could get to the end zone. And at the time, you're thinking, okay, not a big deal. So Sherman's still going to be up. They'll be up 22-7. And then hopefully they'll try to find a way to get that one back. But you are more or less conceding that score. But as you know, you make a hustle play. You never know what's going to happen. And on the first play, they bobbled the snap. And so they ended up going back. Instead of being on the 1-yard line, they were a couple yards back because they just had to fall on it. And then on second down, ball carrier's trying to run through the line. There's bodies everywhere. Chaz Brown, as the running back is being twisted around, is coming over, knocks the ball out. Connor Clark picks it up, and crisis averted. No points on the board. Still 22-0. So that actually was the best chance to score. But after that, Lebanon Trail was very inconsistent. Bowen also had an interception as the Trailblazers had gotten inside. Right about to the Sherman 30-yard line in the first half. Lebanon Trail made a quarterback change late in the first half to try to spark something. It almost did, but again, Sherman's defense, played really well. They played really well the week before against Centennial, and then they carried over. They got a stop on fourth down to end that possession, or to end one of those possessions, and the offense gets some big plays along the way. Caleb Thompson has a touchdown run early, has 16 carries for 94 yards. Phoenix Grant has a touchdown run. He has 13 carries for 82 yards. He also throws for 176 yards, was 10 of 15 passing. Had a touchdown pass to Vontrell Sanders. Also had a long pass to J.D. Parker that helped. That was a big play on a scoring drive. Sanders ended up finishing 4 catches for 77 yards on the touchdown. J.D. Parker, like we mentioned, he finished with 2 catches for 65 yards. Micah Hunt, 2 catches for 27 yards, but one of them was was a big one on fourth down to keep that drive moving. And then Dane Castleberry in the fourth quarter kicks a couple field goals to kind of extend that lead a little bit after it was 22-3. Not really in doubt, but he kicks 2 field goals in the fourth quarter, 28 yards and 39 yards, and Sherman comes away with a 28-3 victory. So they're sitting tied in fourth place with Centennial. So that shows how big, even this early, how big that loss was, because Sherman could be one of 4 teams sitting at 2-0. The others right now are Frisco, Reedy, and Heritage. Sherman could have been in that mix. Instead, right now they're tied with Centennial, and then below them, nobody has a win. Lone Star and Lebanon Trail are both 0-1, and Wakeland and Liberty are 0-2. So Sherman's off this week. They're going to see what happens in this district, just looking at the matchups. There's 2 Thursday games and 2 Friday games. Lebanon Trail is playing Frisco. I assume Frisco is going to win. Centennial playing Heritage is probably the first key game that Sherman's going to be watching. I assume, if you want to assume these sort of things, that they're rooting for Heritage, since they still have to play Frisco Heritage and they don't have the tiebreaker against Centennial. But Centennial Heritage is on Thursday, and that's a big game to watch for. Liberty's playing Reedy. Reedy should win that one handily. And then Wakeland Lone Star is another big one, because Wakeland's 0-2 and Lone Star's 0-1. They've both already played Reedy, who is starting to establish itself as potentially the district favorite. It's probably either them or Frisco if we're just looking at what's happened so far in the results. And if Lone Star wins that one, that's Wakeland's in a world of trouble at 0-3. And a lot of people, expected them to at least be a playoff team, maybe even compete for this district championship. And that's not looking very likely right now, based on that. But Sherman's got a chance to rest up. Like we said, they host Frisco, who I expect to be 3-0 after they play Lebanon Trail on Thursday night. So Sherman will get right back at it, and we'll see where things stand. But I think that's how things are going to play out in that district. And it's going to be interesting to see. They have Frisco, and then they have Heritage to get back into things. And I think you at least need a split there. If you could somehow get those 2 wins, that really sets you up in a good spot, because you have Liberty at the end, and Liberty has not won a game, and I don't know if they're going to win a game. Maybe the only game that they win is against Lebanon Trail. So if you can get a couple wins here right when you get back to it, you've got a chance. And the Bearcats have to love the way the defense is playing. They've done really well keeping people out of the end zone. You give up 1 touchdown in your last, I think, 9 or 10 quarters. You're doing something right. So that group has really come together. And I think just with the offense, I think it's just if they just need to be consistent for all 4 quarters. They have their spurts where they look really good. They put together 2 or 3 good drives, or they put together a good half or a really good quarter, and then they kind of go silent for a little bit. If I don't think we've seen a full 4-quarter effort where this offense is clicking on all cylinders. And if they get that in a couple of these games, the way the defense is playing, they've got a shot. And I think that's all you can ask for. If they were sitting at 0-2 right now, it would be an uphill battle. You've got the lead on a lot of people that you still have to play. And as long as you can take care of your business and have the tiebreaker over some of those people, that may be it. And if it comes down to the tiebreaker with Centennial, then that's what it comes down to. But you need to put yourself in position for that. For sure. So that's Sherman with the bye in 6-5A action. And Pottsboro also has a bye this week. That district, 5-3A Division 1, they're kicking off district this week. And if you remember from the realignment podcast, it is essentially the same district as last year. The only difference is Howe dropped down to Division 2. And because of that, and they didn't add any replacements, there's an odd number of teams. So unlike last year, when everybody took the bye before district play, which would have been last week, they have to, put it through the schedule, and it just so happens that Pottsboro got the bye to start off. So everybody else in the district's going to play this week. Pottsboro's going to be sitting. They probably the way they've started to the season, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because they've been real hot and they won last week against Munster, 50-15. Another big offensive night for the Cardinals. The only loss we talked about, they were a late touchdown against Whitesboro for being undefeated. They're 3-1 on the season going into district play, with the only loss to an undefeated Whitesboro team that's really good. And so they're in a good spot. And again, last week, they turned it on, especially in the second half, where they pull away from Munster. To touch on the highlights in that one, over 500 total yards again, 300 plus on the ground, 207 yards passing. Major McBride, 11 carries, 213 yards, 2 touchdowns. Halen Flanagan, 10 of 17 passing, 207 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also ran for, he didn't run for a touchdown in this one. Carson Butcher's the other one that ran for a touchdown for Pottsboro. 3 different receivers with touchdowns. Jude Bentley led the effort, 4 catches, 97 yards, and a TD. Reed Thompson right behind, 3 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. And Brady Fulton makes his catch count. It was a touchdown as well. Cohen Rakita returns a fumble, 89 yards, and that accounts for all of your scoring in that one. And like we said, they were down 8-0. And then they end up, scoring twice in the second, twice in the third, and then another one before Munster's able to score again, and then they add a couple late touchdowns. Pottsboro does to push that game away. And you look at, like we said, with this district, it's been very competitive. The times that Pottsboro's been in this district the last couple of years, they've been in the mix not only for the top seed, but just a playoff spot in general. And it's been competitive. It's come down to tiebreakers to get in, and I think a lot of people expect that to be the same. Just to touch on this district again, Mount Vernon and Winnsboro are 2 of the favorite teams along with Pottsboro. They're both 4-0. They're both state ranked. Mount Vernon had a really good year last year, went deep, and they have a lot of those same guys back. So they're the district favorite to see if somebody knocks them off. And then Bonham, Mineola, and Commerce are both 2-2. Rains is at the rear at 1-3. And I think like what everyone's looking at, Pottsboro, in contention definitely for a playoff spot. I think it would be a shock if they didn't get a playoff spot. And then the only question is, what do you do against Winnsboro and Mount Vernon based on the projections? And so while they're sitting this week, Commerce plays Bonham, Mount Vernon plays Mineola, and Emory Rains plays Winnsboro. And then when Pottsboro jumps in next Friday, they host Mineola. So obviously that's going to be interesting to see what Mineola can do against Mount Vernon right off the bat. And then the other interesting thing is that Mount Vernon and Winnsboro play the first week in October. So we'll have a pretty good idea by then who at least is the favorite amongst those two, who pulls out a win there, and see what happens. So if you're Pottsboro, you're in a good spot. Like we said, you're a couple minutes away from being 4-0 yourself. The offense has been really good. Not that the defense hasn't been very bad, but like I said, Pottsboro's been putting up some big numbers, a lot of yards. Major McBride's having a really good year. Halen Flanagan's been efficient, and like we said, it's spreading the ball around. There hasn't been just one actual go-to guy. Reed Thompson does lead them in receiving, but when you look on a week-to-week basis, this guy pops up, this guy does something the next week, and so it's very hard to stop when you have a couple options and you have a guy in the backfield with you that is off to a really good start. And Flanagan's had some big games on the ground as well, so there is that dual threat. You can't just key on McBride to get the offense going on the ground, because Flanagan's had some 100-yard games so far himself. So going to be interesting to see what Pottsboro can do in that district. Like we said, they've got Mount Vernon last, so to look way in advance, they're not going to see Mount Vernon until the very end. So we could have what we've had the last couple of years going into those last couple of weeks, where we know who's what game is actually going to be the decider. The winner would get the district championship, and the loser would get the second seed or be tied with somebody in second, because that's how competitive 5-3A Division I has been. So Pottsboro and Sherman both kind of hanging out this week, waiting to see what happens in their district before they get back to it next Friday. We have a bunch of other teams that are in district action this week. The Denison Yellow Jackets, they played their district opener last week in Greenville, and yet another comeback, second half effort, gritty, gutty, 34-27 victory against the Lions. And this, we've talked about it from week one. They beat Sherman by a touchdown, had to come back from down 2 scores to do that. They had to come back and force overtime to beat Kennedale to end non-district play. And here they are again in a game where they find themselves down in the third quarter. They have to find a way to tie it, and then they eventually get the lead in the fourth quarter on a 44-yard reverse. Great play call to get the ball in Kyson Lusain's hands, this time on a reverse. He makes a couple moves downfield and is able to get into the end zone with what turns out to be the deciding score. Greenville had the ball twice after that. One was a turnover. Kenyon Kelly forced it, a fumble, and recovered, and he recovered it. And then Greenville put together a drive. They got inside, I think it was inside the 30-yard line of Denison, but they turned it over on downs. The Jackets held. Jacoby DeHorny made a great pass breakup on a ball that was going to drop into a receiver's hands right as he crossed the goal line in the middle of the field. He was able to time his jump and get a hand on it right before it fell into the receiver's hands, and that ended up being the difference. Denison got the ball back with 5.5 minutes left, and they ran out the clock. And that's what this group has shown. They will grind you down. They had, I think, 3 drives in this game of at least 11 plays, including the last one to run the clock out. And it was Jack Alleman did the lion's share of that. He had 23 carries for 146 yards and 3 touchdowns. Grant Yerkes had 8 carries for 45 yards, got dinged up a little bit, didn't play a whole lot in the second half, but was big in the first half in kind of establishing that tone. We mentioned Lusain. He had 5 catches for 99 yards. And Josh Kurtenbach threw for 135 yards, 9 of 14 on the passing numbers. Also ran 11 times for 40 yards and had a touchdown run in that one. And basically it was Denison trying to survive the Micah Simpson show. We talked about him last week. You get the ball in his hands, he's electric. He's speedy and shifty and can make plays in the open field. He ended up with 182 yards on 22 carries, had 2 touchdown runs, also had a touchdown pass on 4th down where he scrambled around, made something happen. Right before halftime, he had 2 touchdowns called back. Greenville did have 12 penalties. Denison had 11, so you can't really blame that for Greenville because Denison had them too. But obviously Greenville's was more costly because they had 2 touchdowns by Simpson called back because of the penalties. So they were able to survive. I think Greenville showed they're dangerous. I think they're going to knock somebody off in this district that they're not supposed to, and Denison can feel lucky that they were able to avoid that being them. And so they're 1-0, and now they have to face a Lovejoy team that is very highly thought of, even though they come in. Their record is 2-2. They are 1-0 in district. They won last week 59-7 against Terrell in a game that was 24-7 at halftime, and then they turned on the Jets in the second half. You say, okay, so Lovejoy's 2-2. Obviously, it's an okay record. It's a 500 record. But the difference is their 2 losses, both by a single score. They lost to Argyle and they lost to North Crowley. Both those teams are still undefeated. Their other win was against College Station, and who went deep in the playoffs last year, and they haven't lost outside of losing to Lovejoy. So much like we've talked about with Gunner, a lot of people didn't want to play Lovejoy. They went to the state quarterfinals last year for the second straight year. They lost to South Oak Cliff, who ended up winning the state championship. So the feeling in Lovejoy is, hey, that could have been us. They went 12-2 last year, and so there were high expectations again. And obviously, when they have a lot of the kids that people will see on Friday night at Munson Stadium, they're people that Dennis people know because they've been playing against the Jackets. There's seniors that are 3-year starters at the varsity level. There's juniors that have made an impact in the last year or two. So nobody really wanted to play Lovejoy, and that's why their schedule was kind of ridiculous for non-district. And so they're not in a bad spot. And we'll talk about Brock, because that's who's going to play last week. Brock is 0-4, and everybody's like, oh, well, yeah, they're 0-4, but look who they lost to. No one's going to be surprised if they run off 12 wins and make it to the state championship game. And Lovejoy's kind of in that same boat. 10 weeks from now, they could easily be 12-2 back in the quarterfinals, and nobody bats an eye because Argyle and North Crowley are in similar positions in their brackets. So it's gonna be a challenge. I bring this up every year when we talk about Lovejoy Denison. Lovejoy has beaten Denison all 8 times. Before last year, 3 of them were close. And so it's I don't know what it is, but it just seems like Lovejoy has this sort of hex over Denison. One of these years it's going to happen. I don't know if it's this year. I think that's what we say about the Battle of the Axe. There's no way that Denison can keep going against Sherman. The law of averages says Sherman's got to win one of them, and I know that's how the Sherman people feel. Like, one of these years we're going to win, and I feel like that's what Denison has against Lovejoy. Is we lose to these guys in overtime. We lose to these guys by 7 points. We play them tough for a half, and then something happens, and we just have not found a way to do it. I think it's going to happen one of these days, and I feel like this might be the offense that can do it. This is an offense that we saw against Greenville. I think and I haven't talked to Coach Whitson yet, but I feel like this is going to be one of those. We want to keep that offense off the field as much as possible, and you got to string together drives. You got to convert third downs. They got to be 3rd and short. They can't be 3rd and 8, and hope you can get that taken care of. So it's going to be interesting. Last year the game got out of hand early, like I said, but the year before that is a close game. They've gone to overtime. It's just I don't know what to expect. In the long run, it may not make a difference. If you're Denison and you win this game, then you're in a really good spot, I think. But just the way things happened in the first week of this district, Denison beat Greenville, which I think a lot of people thought would happen. Lovejoy beat Terrell, which I think a lot of people thought would happen. Melissa beat Crandall. I think people thought that would happen. The score was very lopsided. It was 50-22. I don't think people saw that coming. And then perhaps in a bit of a shocker, Mesquite Poteet beat Princeton. And the only reason I say that was potentially a shocker was because Mesquite Poteet was 0-3 and had literally scored 21 points in 3 games. So that was kind of surprising. They won that game 14-10. So that obviously shows a little bit between where those teams are specifically. So whatever happens, like what I said, whatever happens this week for Denison, they're going. Everybody has the bye next week in this district. They plan that to play 5 games and then take a bye and then play the last 5 games of the season. And then Denison has Terrell out of the bye, and that could be a swing game. I think the way things are looking right now, if you're Denison, the biggest 2 swing games for you are Terrell and then Crandall, which comes up later in October, because I think those are the games you want to win for sure to make sure that you don't have a repeat of what Denison had done a few years ago, which is you beat people in front of you, but you don't beat the people that you end up tied with, and then they get the last playoff spot, or there's a 3-way tie for 3rd place because you beat the 1st place team, but you couldn't beat the teams that you're tied with, or you beat the 2nd place team, but you couldn't beat the 4th place team that you're tied with. That doesn't do you any good. So that first swing game against right out of the bye is going to be interesting. Like I said, not just because we'll see what the outcome is, because good or bad, it's going to be interesting to see what Denison does coming off that bye because of what it will mean going into that game on the October 7th at Terrell. But I'm interested to see what happens when Lovejoy comes to Denison on Friday night. The next team that we will talk about, we'll get all the district games out of the way first before we get into the non-district games, because obviously those are the ones with more importance this week. We'll talk about the Van Alstyne Panthers. They are hosting Crum, and this is the 5-4A Division II opener. Van Alstyne and Crum are both 1-3. The Panthers lost last week 45-15 against Sulphur Springs, and Crum lost 41-21 against Cattle Mills. Just quickly to touch on the Van Alstyne's game, they fell behind 21-0. They got both of their touchdowns in the second quarter, but unfortunately after getting up 21-0 and then Van Alstyne getting on the board, Sulphur Springs also scored again, so they were up 35-15 at halftime. Dakota Howard had a hand in both of the touchdowns for the Panthers. He threw a 7-yard TD pass to Jackson Skinner and had an 8-yard touchdown run. He finished with 15 carries for 50 yards. Jaden Mahan had 22 carries for 106 yards. And things did not go well beyond that. Sulphur Springs put up over 400 yards of offense. The passing game was pretty good. The 22 of 28 passing for 225, very efficient. All but one of the touchdowns was in the air, and the one touchdown run was by the quarterback. So he kind of led the way for Sulphur Springs. The big thing, obviously, you got a clean slate if you're Van Alstyne. You may be 1-3. You played an Anna team that went and beat Salina, and now is being talked amongst one of the top 5 teams in 4A Division I after winning that game close last week. And you had a close loss to Pottsboro, so you could easily be 2-2. But I don't think the last 2 weeks have a big or are going to have a big impact on what Van Alstyne needs to do in this district. And the first step is beating Crum. We talked about this is a little bit of a new district. It's bigger, so you have to beat more people. And just to give you a refresher, 5-4A Division II is Sanger, Bridgeport, Farmersville, Aubrey, Van Alstyne, Crum, and Gainesville. So to get to the top 4, you got to win at least 3 games. Sanger is off to a 4-0 start. Bridgeport is 3-1. Farmersville and Aubrey are 2-2. Van Alstyne and Crum are 1-3, and Gainesville is 0-4. So right off the bat, you're facing one of the teams that has struggled like you, and you probably want to get a win to get off on the right foot. This is a team you have been with the last 2 years. Your games against them the last 2 years have not been close. It does not look like Crum has gotten better in that department, and so it's you have a chance to take the right first step. You win this game, you beat Gainesville, and you got to beat one other team to at least be in the mix for a playoff spot. And then after that, things can, like I said, once we start getting into the next week or so to see who matches up against who. Like we said, you can talk about records. During non-district play, sometimes you go 4-0 like a Sanger, and you could start 0-3 in district. Aubrey is 2-2. They're a team that went deep last year, and I think they expect to do that. They expected to do that again. Maybe that 2-2 is a hard 2-2 and not an easy 2-2, where you expect somebody to go 4-0 against that schedule. So Van Alstyne's got a chance to get a step in the right direction. Obviously, the biggest thing for them, I think the offense needs to be a little bit better, a little more efficient, especially in the passing game. They've gone with 2 quarterbacks we've seen in Dakota Howard and Weston Johnson, and it has had mixed results. They had a comeback win with it, and in games like this, there's 3 interceptions, and the completion percentage is not very good, and you only get you barely get 100. You don't get 100 yards from your passing game. then that's an issue. So Crum's a good place to start. Get off on the right foot this week. You're hosting them, so that's always, you want to protect the home field in district. So we'll see what happens. And in the games that Crum has lost, you've given up at least 41 points in every one of the games. So the defense is there to take advantage of, and we'll see if Finn Alston can do that when they host Crum on Friday night. The next game, we will move over to District 4-3A, Division 1, and we will welcome back the Whitesboro Bearcats because the Bearcats did not play last week. Their game was canceled against Sulphur. They were going to go up into Oklahoma and play Sulphur, and their coach sadly passed away. We mentioned that last week, Jim Dixon. After it was on, I believe, I don't know if it was late Saturday or early Sunday morning that the news came out that he had passed away, and so both teams obviously agreed to cancel that game, and Whitesboro did not find a game to pick up to play anyway. So they're back after that week off, and they're going to be hosting Pilot Point to open up 4-3A Division 1 play. And it's kind of the same thing with Pottsboro we talked about. With their district, this is pretty much the exact same district as the last couple years. The only exception is Bowie dropped out, which is not a big deal in the long run because everybody beat Bowie, so it's just one less win that everybody's getting. But the district again, Whitesboro, Paradise, Ponder, Boyd, Pilot Point, Peaster, and Brock. Paradise is 4-0. Whitesboro is 3-0, obviously because they're one short of the games. Ponder and Boyd are 3-1. Pilot Point is 1-3. They've actually lost 3 straight, including the loss last week against Bells, 56-19. We'll delve super into that when we talk about the Bells Panthers. And then Brock is bringing up the rear at 0-4, but we've talked about it. We'll talk about it again when we talk about Gunnery in a little bit. Their schedule has been ridiculously hard, and they're still probably the favorite to win this district. Now, Paradise has jumped up with their play so far. They've been killing people. They have strong offensive numbers, strong defensive numbers. I don't know what that means because it is non-district. And so it's going to be interesting. They start off with Ponder, and Ponder's put up a ton of points. They've also given up a ton of points. That score has a chance to be something that could be something crazy. Ponder's played a bunch of crazy scores so far, but that definitely has the chance for that. And then Brock is playing Boyd. Peaster has the bye. I think the feeling is, looking at these games, Whitesboro, Brock, and Paradise are probably going to win. And then it'll be a couple weeks before we actually get into those three playing each other. Whitesboro and Brock don't play until the middle of October. And then Brock and Paradise play the week after that. And then Paradise and Whitesboro play the week after that. So we've got 3 more weeks before we can really start figuring out who's going to be where, unless there's an upset along the way. The only question we have with Whitesboro, I think, is, they had 2 weeks off. So did that mess them up? Is there a rust factor because they were planning on playing and now they're not? So I don't know. You never know. Obviously, they didn't start the week practicing and then have stuff get canceled on a Wednesday or Thursday. But maybe it helps because you got to bye there and you're going to play 4 games and then have a bye going into the last 2 games. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they come out now. This has turned into a little bit of a rivalry. It kind of already was because of the proximity, but especially the last couple of years, this has been a key game in district play for seeding, especially. And last year, Pilot Point won this game in double overtime. So I know Whitesboro is going into this thing. They're not going to look at that record, that 1-3 record, and say, "Oh, we got this," because Pilot Point knows that they feel like they can compete with these guys. They did it last year, pulling out a win in double overtime. And this, I think maybe last year we talked about it before the season. As Whitesboro went through last year, they got off to a bad start. They had injuries. They really didn't start clicking until district play had already started, and I think they kind of snuck up on some people. People know about Whitesboro this year. There's talk about rankings and how high they should be, and they're obviously they're undefeated. They beat a Bells team that's ranked. They beat Pottsboro, who's obviously we know would be undefeated if it wasn't for that. It would have been nice, obviously, to see them be 4-0 at this point, just because people like more data points. And they beat a Crum team, pretty badly as well. Up in 4A Division 2. So everybody's not that you wouldn't take anybody in your district seriously, but obviously everybody I think is gunning for Whitesboro after the season that they finished with the last year, and obviously the expectations are raised in Whitesboro. So if you can pick them off, I don't know if anybody's going to be able to pick off Brock, but if you can pick off Whitesboro, who I think a lot of people view as the second best team in this district, that goes a long way towards you making the playoffs if you're able to pull that off. So going to be interesting to see what happens when Pilot Point goes to Whitesboro as 4-3A Division 1 action kicks off on Friday night. And the last district game that we have this week before we get to the non-district games is District 8 2A Division 2. This is the Collinsville Pirates. They are heading to Lindsay. This is a 7 o'clock game, so note that if you're traveling out to Lindsay. 7 o'clock game. Collinsville is 3-1 after they lost last week 33-21 against Cooper. And Lindsay is 0-4 after they lost to Valley View 24-0. So I don't know what to think about this game. Obviously Collinsville was rolling. We said last week that was going to be a very interesting matchup to play another undefeated team who is rolling as well. And Cooper comes away with the win, 33-21, pulling away in the second half. This is a game Collinsville actually led 14-7 at halftime. But Cooper's got that ground game. They spread it around. They had two guys over 100 yards. They almost had two other guys get there. They ran for 468 yards. Only threw it twice. Completed one for 20 yards. But they did all their damage on the ground. And not that Collinsville's yardage is pretty good. They had over 400 yards. They ran a ton of plays. They ran 78 plays. The big thing for them in this game was turnovers. They had 5 of them, and that was pretty much the difference. Rylan Newman had 40 carries for 185 yards and a touchdown. Logan Jenkins, 20 of 28 for 219, and a touchdown pass to Colin Barnes, but he had 3 interceptions. He also ran for a score. Carter Scott led them 5 catches, 82 yards. Barnes with 4 for 48. Nathan Bocanegra, 6 catches for 43 yards. They just obviously couldn't stop Cooper on the ground, and that was the difference. And Lindsay's been a struggle since the year started. They've really struggled to score. The point total is not terrible, but just to kind of give you an idea, they lost to Paradise, who Paradise is obviously, we said, undefeated, but they scored 7 points against Paradise. They scored 20 points against Seymour. They scored 14 points against Callisburg, and they scored 0 points last week against Valley View. So I don't know what to expect. This was a game last year. We talked about Collinsville went off to that good start. They opened district play with a win against Lindsay, 56-27, and unfortunately they still weren't able to make the playoffs. I'm really interested to see what happens here. Part of that is also because Collinsville plays and then they have the bye. This is another one of those districts where it's the rolling bye throughout. And the other reason it's significant is if Collinsville wins this game and they go into their bye, on the bye week is Munster versus Santo. Now, Santo is state ranked. Munster was ranked until this week when they lost again to Pottsboro and they dropped to 1-3. But Santo is 4-0. They've only given up 2 touchdowns all year. This is where we see, okay, Munster played Bells. Munster played Pottsboro. Munster played Paradise. They really punched above their weight in those 3 losses. And they have a win over a good Windthorst team. So that game being super early is really going to tell a lot about how good Santo is, and is Munster still Munster but they just played a really tough non-district schedule. So Collinsville's going to sit and watch that happen, and just kind of see who is the front runner right away. And they finish 2 of the last 3 weeks. They play Santo, and then they play Collinsville, or then they play Munster, and then they play Chico to finish. So those heavy hitters for Collinsville are towards the end. So if you're Collinsville, you think, okay, we can bank some wins and maybe lock up a playoff spot before we even get to those games, and then we don't need to win those games to at least get in. Because at bare minimum now, after missing last year, you just want to get in and then take care of the seeding from there. And like I said, Lindsay's they could be throwing the kitchen sink at it, or they could be going, hey, non-district doesn't matter, district is what matters. So we'll see if that means anything or not. And it's a road game too, so there's that aspect to it as well. Collinsville's going to go to Lindsay, so very interested to see what this outcome is, and what it might mean for what the next couple of weeks have in store for Collinsville, and where they think they slot in this 8-2A Division 2 that is themselves, Santo, Munster, like we mentioned, Lindsay, Era, Chico, and Celeste. Santo's 4-0, Collinsville and Celeste are 3-1. And then Chico, Munster, and Era are 1-3, and Lindsay's 0-4. So I don't know how much we can look at those records and figure out who the playoff teams are, because there's one of those teams that's 1-3 or 0-4 is going to make the playoffs, and that's just by the numbers. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. So those are all the district games this week, and we do have a couple of non-district games. Actually, we have several, in fact. And we do have an all-local matchup, and we always like to get those out of the way first when we're looking at the games of the week. And we have Howe traveling to SNS. We have Howe at 3-1. They won last week 42-14 against Tioga. And SNS gets their first win of the season. They're 1-3. They won 35-29 against Whitewright. So we'll touch on Howe's game first. Like we said, so they beat Tioga. They jump up early. And then kind of shut Tioga down. Defensively, they got a 51-yard interception return from Cooper Jones. Austin Haley, 8 of 13 passing, 155 yards, but does have 3 touchdown passes. One of them is to Antoine Rattler, one of them is to Ryan Huff, and one of them is to Tristan Williams. Rattler does have a big day on the ground, doesn't get in the end zone, but he does have 17 carries for 156 yards. Haley did get in with a touchdown run. He had 7 carries for 75 yards. Huff led the way, receiving 2 for 49. Cooper Jones, his lone catch was for a touchdown. Oh, excuse me, no, he had a touchdown run, but his lone catch was for 39 yards. And it was another balanced sort of game for Howe, spreading it around. They're 3-1. Again, we've talked about it. They went 0-10 the last 2 years. And then 3-7 the year before that. So they've got as many wins this year as they did the last 3 years combined. And this is a fun fact that I looked up and I confirmed with Monty Walker of the Howe Enterprise and broadcaster of the Howe games. I went back and looked through all the year by year. The last 3 games, Howe has scored at least 42 points. And that is the first time in program history that Howe has scored at least 42 points. They scored 49 against Tom Bean in a win, and then 42 in a loss to Commerce, and then 42 against Tioga. It's the first time that's been done in school history, 3 straight games of at least 42 points, and I'm sure they'd like to continue to add that streak against SNS, because they've got district right around the corner next week, and this is an opportunity to keep that momentum going. Obviously, the worst case scenario to be 3-2 after 5 games. If you would have said that before the season, Howe would have gladly taken it, knowing that it's just so much more success than all these kids have known on the varsity level. And so, but a chance to be 4-1 going into that district with Gunner and Bells, and potentially to say, hey, we think we're maybe we're the 3rd best team at worst, and we want to take our shot at the 2 big dogs in that district. So that's Howe's perspective of it, and then we have SNS. Had homecoming, all the excitement, all of that stuff, and not only that, you get a win. They rally with a late fourth quarter touchdown pass from Braden Turner to Garrett Wise, 44 yards in the final minute, after Whitewright had actually rallied to go in front in the fourth quarter, that the Rams had to go and score. They do. They get a win. First win for new head coach Jeff Hill. Brett Stewart has 7 carries, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns. We mentioned that the Garrett Wise had the touchdown pass there. He had 3 catches. He had 3 catches for 55 yards. Kevin Sanchez, 4 catches for 52 yards and has 2 carries for 82 yards. That 82 yard was all the 82 yards was all on one of those runs, which was a fake punt. Which if you're running 82 yards, that means you're actually running like 90 yards, because the run counts from the line of scrimmage, and you're a punter and you're back punting. So a risky but rewarding decision there for Sanchez and the Rams. Chase Sloan adds a touchdown run. He had 9 carries for 49 yards. And obviously it's the best SNS has looked all season. Being able to move the ball. Only have 1 turnover. Over 300 yards of offense. There was a little bit of balance to that offense. And that's, as we get closer to district, that's what you want to see. If you can put it together again this week, get 2 wins in a row going into district play, that's good for them, because obviously they're in a new district where there's a lot of, they don't really know what to expect over there, going back out west, and to have the confidence of maybe being 2-3, and coming off, consecutive wins, that could be huge. So that's obviously got a lot of eyes on that, because it is an all-local matchup, and it's going to be a question of, can Howe continue its strong start to the season, or will SNS be able to continue to put together something right here before district play starts for them. So that's going to be Howe at SNS. Oh, maybe that's homecoming this week. I don't know. I thought homecoming was last week, but maybe I had it wrong. But anyway, so how's it going to SNS this week? Next game, Bells is going to Callisburg. This is 3-1 Bells against 2-2 Callisburg. Bells is coming off the 56-19 win against Pilot Point. Like we said, we talked about Whitesboro, and Callisburg picked up a big win against Bonham, 68-26, to get to 2-2. This is a game where I think we expect a lot of running. Should be a quick game. Callisburg likes to run the ball, and Bells of course does as well. And we saw it last week again. They ran 51 times for 373 yards. They threw 1 pass. It was incomplete. So 52 plays, 51 runs. Spencer Hines, 6 carries, 117 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Grady Waldrop, 16 carries, 118 yards, and a touchdown. Brock Baker, 10 carries for 63 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jacob Aaron, the quarterback, added a touchdown run. Bryce Thompson added a touchdown run. This was a game where, Bells jumped out early, goes into halftime with a 35-12 lead, adds 2 more touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and then we're on our way. And like we said, same thing with Pottsboro. Bells is sitting here, we're 3-1. We're 1 late touchdown drive against Whitesboro from being 4-0. Even with that loss, and it says how good, the area is, and the usual suspects. The 3A Division II state rankings came out. They come out every week, but this week Gunner is number 1, which I think everybody would expect. Number 2 is Holiday, which if you're Gunner and Bells, that's obviously something to pay attention to based on your previous history and what you may encounter in the playoffs. But coming in 4th place is the Bells Panthers, even though they do have a loss. 3A Division II is off to a crazy start. A lot of teams that people thought were going to be still undefeated at this point are not. Some of them have multiple losses. And so Bells is, like I said, and Bells played a good schedule. So, I think that has certainly helped their profile as well. And this is another, this should be a good matchup. It's been a while since these two have played. But obviously, what we've talked about with Calsburg when they played other teams from around here, they've got a good foundation there. The last couple of years under Eddie Gill, and so it should be a good game. I mean, you think so. But Bells has a chance to roll in district play, and if they get that ground attack going, it's going to be hard to stop. So we'll see what happens when Bells travels to Calsburg on Friday night. We mentioned the Gunner Tigers a couple times. We'll get to their game right now. They go on the road again this week. So you have 3-0 Gunner at 1-3 Gladewater. Gladewater lost last week 52-14 against Malakoff. And as we have mentioned, the Gunner Tigers went west in what we hoped would have been a more hyped showdown against Brock. The game definitely lived up to the hype in terms of the action on the field. Gunner came away 21-16 win. And I think if you would have told anybody that would have been the final score, or the winner would have had 5 points, or that Brock would have won that game 21-16, I think everybody could have believed any one of those outcomes. We've said it. Brock is 0-4. If they had played 100 other schedules, they probably would have been 3-0. No, they're probably going to win that district, like we said. They're probably going to go, at least to the state semifinals, if not further. And this was a great test. This is one of the, you hate to say it because Gunner's been so good. This was such a huge test for them, and not just because of the opponent, but also the way this game went and the way this game was played. Gunner needed to do something in all 3 phases to win this game, and they did. They actually were held scoreless in the first half. I don't even know the last time that happened. I don't even know if I can go back and find the last time that happened. It's been a while. There's 1 or 2 games, maybe 6 or 7 years ago that they could have, but I think they, but their defense played great because it's 3-0 at halftime on a Brock field goal. And then in the third quarter, Gunner gets the ball right away. Quick pass from Walker Overman to Ivy Hellman, who gains the left sideline, goes 77 yards. Gunner leads. Then Brock comes right back, goes right back in front, 10-7. And then on the kickoff of that, Jace Martin brings it back 92 yards. That's his second kickoff return for a touchdown this year. And Gunner goes back in front. And then later in the third quarter, Brock is driving and has a chance to go back in front because it's only 14-10. And Cannon Lemberg gets a pass to the right side, kind of a flutter ball, picks it off, it goes 86 yards the other way for a touchdown, and so now it's 21-10. Brock does score in the fourth quarter, but that's it. Gunner hangs on. It was a game that I think everybody thought was going to happen. It was good to see Gunner tested. Their numbers are not pretty. Brock's are not much better. They're a little more pretty. But we've seen that Gunner the first 2 games. You're up 60-0 in the second quarter. You're up. You beat somebody 41-0. And bigger programs. I don't think people expected those scores. For maybe at least one of those games. And you were tested in this game, and it's going to make Gunner better in the long run. They may not see a better team until they get to their state championship or their state semifinal, however far they get. This may be the standard for all their opponents going forward. And Gladewater has normally been a pretty good team. They're a little down this year from the looks of it. They already have as many losses as they did all of last season. So you're playing a bigger school. You're still playing a bigger school. I just don't know what that means. Just based on their schedules, if they've had injuries, I'm not really sure. But I don't think that the Gladewater game does not have as big a circle around it maybe as it may have a month or 2 ago. But you also have to wonder, how beat up is Gunner? I know there were some injuries that came about from this game, this one against Brock. This was a physical game. to get that win, to expend all that energy, what does that mean? And, also, I'm not that you would, maybe there are some guys that don't play this week, to get ready for district play. Not that you're going to throw a game or anything like that, but if this is not a playoff game. You have your bye next week, so you could give those guys 2.5 weeks before they play. And Gunner plays Bells right out the chute to kick off district play. So that's the game that really counts. Beating Gladewater would be nice, but if there's a guy or two that needs to sit, and that maybe changes the math in beating Gladewater, but they are back to 90 or 100% for Bells. I think that's you've got to think big picture if you're Gunner. Much like if you're Brock, you're thinking big picture. You're not worried about losses on a week-to-week basis, especially in non-district play. Gunner doesn't need to be 16-0, or I guess 15-0 this year because they didn't have an opening game. No one's gonna care if they end up winning state, and they're 14-1. But a guy got 3 weeks to get healthy instead of trying to play through it, gets hurt, makes it worse, has to sit even longer. So, but again, it's another interesting matchup just to kind of see where Gunner is, after such a physical close game last week, to have to come out again and do that, and make another long trip, out to Gladewater, on Friday night. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes as well. 3 more games here on the schedule. Tom Bean is going to Leonard. Tom Bean is 2-2 after they won 30-18 against Chico, and Leonard is 3-1. They won 45-0 against Trenton, which of course is interesting because Tom Bean is in that district with Trenton. So we have a comparative score for when we get into district play for them. This is interesting that they haven't played since 2015, but the last time that they played a non-district game was 1991. So usually they've always been together because they're close enough and they've been in a district. But obviously that's no longer the case with Tom Bean down in 2A and Leonard in 3A. And to touch on the win for Tom Bean last week, so they bounced back after losing the week before, and we talked about what was that going to look like, and so here's Tom Bean getting a win. Gavin Hamilton, 22 carries, 135 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Branson Ashlock, 16 of 21 passing, 185 yards, and 2 touchdowns. 1 to DJ Pearson and 1 to Braylon Barrett. Bobby Rogers led them in receiving. He had 5 catches for 72 yards, and Pearson had 5 catches for 47 yards. And obviously everything we've talked about with Tom Bean, everything is building and laying a better foundation. They went 0-9 last year. They've already got 2 wins. This is another sort of measuring stick game. They went to Howe and that didn't go very well. So the question for them is going to be, can they find some consistency on a week-to-week basis, and especially with district play around the corner. How do you attack a Leonard team that's gotten off to a pretty good start? They're 3-1. They've had a couple close games. Last week was not one of them. So I think this is going to be interesting to see what Tom Bean does. Again, we talked about how would they handle success, because they won that first game and then they went into Howe. Both those teams, won their openers. Everybody was excited because we ended these long losing streaks. Somebody was going to be 2-0, and that game got out of hand quickly for Tom Bean. Then, so now you have a situation here again. They get a win. They kind of they had a lead at halftime. They made it stand up, and they led the whole second half. Tacked on a late touchdown to extend that lead. Can you build on that? Can you have 2 weeks in a row where you win? And then we're talking about going into district play. Then what can you do there? So that's going to be interesting to see with Tom Bean going to Leonard on on Friday night. And then next, White at Blue Ridge. The old joke is, I guarantee you the Tigers are going to win because you got two Tigers playing each other and somebody's got to win. It's not the old days where you have ties. White is 2-2, as is Blue Ridge. White is coming off the loss to SNS, like we mentioned, 35-29, and Blue Ridge won 49-0 against Wolf City. So obviously Blue Ridge is feeling really good, having a chance to build on that. I think they want to show that they can be competitive for a playoff spot in that district with Gunner Bells. How they've already matched their win total from last season. You take it to the next step. Hey, we've got more wins than last year, and we're not even in district play. And I think White-Wright's in a bit of an interesting situation, much like with potentially some of the guys that got hurt for Gunner. So you lose that game last week. You're playing with your third-string quarterback. You're moving guys around to make that work. They put Kenneth York at quarterback for last week. And they, like I said, you scored 29 points. That's real good. The offense still puts up over 300 yards. You've got a pair of 100-yard runners. York has 18 carries for 104 yards and 2 touchdown runs. He also threw a touchdown pass to Deegan Bemmett. And Maverick Sartain, normally a big threat at receiver. They put him in the backfield as part of the domino effect. And he has 25 carries for 137 yards and a touchdown as well. And they tried to rally. They did rally. You take the lead in the fourth quarter, and they weren't able to get a stop on that final drive by SNS. So looking to bounce back. You want to end you don't want to lose 3 in a row. You want to have success going into district play. And it's going to be interesting, but of course the thing is, so you have guys that are hurt, and what is more important to you? It's got to be the district wins. It's got to be knowing that, again, like some of these other people, you have your bye next week, so you have a chance to have some guys sit out and get healthy at the expense of a win, knowing that you need them when you start district on October 7th, and the Bullets really, you can't waste any in the district games. So it's going to be interesting to see how White treats it because of they've been bitten by the injury bug, and how will they handle a game that you want to see maybe what some guys can do when it comes to on the field, but you also need people to be healthy, and so that's going to be the measuring stick for White when they go to Blue Ridge on Friday night. And then the last game that we have, talk about teams that are dealing with injury bugs. Tioga is hosting Detroit. Tioga is 2-2 after they lost 42-14 against Howe. We talked about that game earlier, and Detroit is 0-4. They lost 28-20 against Prairieland's junior varsity, not Prairieland, but actually Prairieland JV. And this is a game, again, where you have a team in Tioga that is dealing with injuries, and how people are healing probably depends on what you want to see on the field this week, only because you don't know what you're getting into with that. And again, same situation. They have the bye next week, and so do you want guys playing when they can be resting up and they'll get the full 2.5 weeks to get ready? And you are coming off a game that you lost 42-14. They did run for 309 yards. They put up over 400 yards of offense. Turnovers hurt them a little bit in that one. They had 3 of those. But Chase Evans, 24 carries, 167 yards and a touchdown. Jonah Grubbs, 23 carries for 134 yards. Tyler Henley has 6 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown from Austin Norwood. And so do you want them to get on the field and be playing to get more positive confidence after a loss like that? I don't know. So that's going to be interesting. And you have an opponent that maybe you play guys a little bit, see how it goes, and then you're able to turn it over to some other guys. If you want to do common opponent stuff for coming up, Detroit played Trenton a couple weeks ago. Trenton won 49-18. That gives you some semblance of a baseline for what you might see once you get into district. So, going to be interesting to see, like I said, how Tioga approaches it. They're at home. The opponent's winless, but maybe you hold a guy or two out to get them fully healthy for the start of district play in 2 weeks. So that's a look at Week 5. A look back at Week 4. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll be back here next week. We'll be back every week until the last team in Texoma is standing, and hopefully that's sometime late in December. But we're already late in September. Week 5 out of Week 11 in the regular season. Crazy to see how fast it's going, and the games are really starting to kick up and get serious now as most teams are in district play. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.